Small mighty bunch today. Hey, thanks for joining us. I think it'll be a great conversation today. Let's see. I think we're good to go right now. So I want to all of us to welcome Marlon Burnley today. And Angela Hall, who's been working with Marlon, has been there since the beginning, the genesis of this project. And for those of you who had a chance to watch the pre-recorded session, it's a really powerful piece. And I'm really looking forward to digging in about the process and seeing where this came from, and now in light of what's been happening over the last week and a half. Well, really months, years, but really isolating the last week and a half, how relevant this piece is even more as we look at the darkness that's kind of coming across the country right now. So I'm going to turn this right over to Marlon. Marlon, take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marlon Burnley. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm originally from South Bend, Indiana. That's where I met Scott, of course, working at the University of Notre Dame with their Shakespeare Festival. And currently I'm in the Atlanta, Georgia area. I ended up down here in Georgia when I went to get my MFA at the University of Georgia, and decided to stay down here after graduating for the film and television scene down here. So I'm a full-time actor, writer, starving artist down here. So I'll let Angela tell you a little bit about herself.
All right. I am Angela Hall. I too am located here in Atlanta, Georgia. I received my first graduate degree from Georgia College and State University in dramatic writing, and my second MFA from the University of Georgia, and I am a dissertation away from my PhD. So yeah, a little bit about me. I'm a writer, playwright, screenwriter. I teach dramatic writing and African-American theater history, and this semester, directors of color at the University of Georgia. I've had a number of productions worldwide, actually, of my work. And I am currently working on a TV series with HBO titled Mercy, for which Marlon brilliantly read for me, with me. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it.
Cool.
I'm sorry, Angela, would you give us just a little bit of a snapshot of the Georgia Incarceration Project too?
How could I ever forget that?
Yeah.
I mean, seeing that's why this is a conference on Shakespeare in prisons. Yeah, so Georgia Incarceration Project was a performance project in collaboration with the University of Georgia, Spelman College, and Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. And for some odd reason, the state of Georgia released all of its archives on its incarceral history from 1867, I believe, through the 2000s. And once that happened, they were looking for places, of course, to house and curate this material. And UGA came on the radar, and then working with, at the time, Dr. Ama, who was on faculty in the theater department, who does this kind of work, who takes archival material and turns it into performances, said, hey, that's what we're gonna do. And in fact, Dr. Julie Johnson, one of my besties, was also a co-director on that project, and she's actually here. I'm so happy she's here. And so, yeah, it was daunting. The material was the things that you come across about the treatment of humans it was astonishing. And we had a lot of like moments of, let's step away, let's do some self-care, because it was, and we were dealing with students were doing this project. And so, but it was, while it was daunting and, emotional, it was so well worth it. And we had great response to it, to the point that now, like, there are other splinters coming off of Georgia Incarceration Project. One of them is Idle Crimes and Heavy Work, that I'm working with Dr. Julie Johnson on. I'm the researcher on that and writer, which explores very specifically the labor of African-American women in Georgia. And then another grant as well that we are applying for, that's a media grant that's coming off of this same project. So it's one of those things that just keeps on giving. Just good.
So cool.
And we spoke about this at great length a few days ago, and we got a session we're going to be bringing in the future, I think, that is going to blow your mind about the research that's happened there.
Yeah.
And the university response as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'll leave you to it. Thanks very much, Angela.
Absolutely.
So yeah, Angela, Angela's going to be moderating. I don't know, Angela, if you had any format that you were going to follow, but I'll just hand it over to you. I'm just mainly just a silent observer. So even though you can't see me, or you can, sorry.
Got it. I don't really have a particular format. I'm one of those people who likes to sort of see where the conversation takes us. I have found that, moderating any number of talkbacks, that there's always one question that sort of spurs an entire other thing, and we can delve into that. So I'm just gonna throw out there. First of all, I'm hoping that most of you have seen Marlon's Black in the Box. It's an amazing piece. So my first question is actually to Marlon.
Yeah.
That's to sort of tell us about the genesis of this project, and what made you say, hey, this is something I need to do.
Yeah. So while at University of Georgia, it was in a movement class where we had this assignment to take a piece of literature, like a poem, a song, a story, whatever you can think of, and turn it into a mask performance. So we had a semester of learning how to build mask and perform mask, and we got this assignment. And what I focused on was the song Mr. Bojangles, by Jeff Walker, but the version I'm used to is by Sammy Davis Jr. So that song's always stuck out to me because it's about a man that this writer meets in prison, and he goes on and tells him about his life as a street performer, and how it's just a really tragic story of him and his dog, and he ends up alone, cold, lonely. And so I built a character from that song, and if you saw Black in the Box, that is the dancer, the street performer. And so after that assignment, it was only like a 10-minute piece, and after that I was like, I'm really not done, because like the world we live in right now is really heated, and so I still felt inspired to expand on that. So it went from being a piece about a struggling artist to a struggling Black artist, and then to a struggling people, it got more specific as it grew. So that started in like 2017. I traveled it to some Fringe festivals, won a couple awards for those. And so that was actually like that kept me fueled too. So I'm like, okay, people are getting this, they're paying attention, so I'm going to keep working on it. And then I won a thesis competition for it at the University of Georgia, as I continue to develop it. So even like the product that you guys have seen, like that's not the final product. Like there's so much more to it than what, like it's only 25 minutes. There's no way you can tell the whole story in 25 minutes. So for me, it's a piece that will continue to grow with me as an artist and as a person as I continue to grow and learn.
Awesome. I was reading the synopsis of the piece, and it says that you were. In fact, let me bring that up. It says, "Black in the Box: the story of what happens when a man struggling to find his voice stumbles upon a box filled with 3 mysterious masks." Based upon the critically acclaimed one-man show by Marlon Andrew Burnley, Black in the Box takes us through 3 different stages of Black history, tying it all together to the modern day. How did you choose those 3 different stages of history?
So for me, it's like it just resonated most for me. So like as a like I know what it feels like to be a struggling artist, and like having that be my essence. So of course, like Bojangles spoke for me, and I know what it's like to work menial jobs. Like no, I was not a slave, but like a big part of my growing up was watching my mom work as a maintenance worker, and me having some of those jobs since like the age of 12, like up until like into my 20s. Like it was all physical labor, usually working for white men, and I didn't really feel I didn't really realize the situation I was in until I grew and like look back on those moments. And then just as someone, the going to the speaker, the civil rights movement. But so in grad school, that's where I really found out that like I had a voice and like I had something to say. I just needed to find a way to say it. So yeah, it's all stuff that I can like really relate to, and it was important for me.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the title, this idea of being Black in the box. And it struck me as both metaphorical, of course, of how African Americans, the African American body in particular, is resigned to a particular box, right? Like the scripts that are written on our bodies, from Mandingo to the female Jezebel to the blah 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 to the blah blah blah. So yeah, so that we are in that box, right? The metaphorical box. But then with my work, and I'm sure with Scott's work, then there is an actual box, right? The prison cell is an actual box that is yet again confining the Black body, by large, I should say, disproportionately Black and brown bodies. So I from other people, what did you think about the title? Like, what about this box? How do we feel about being Black in a box?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like that's a great question. Like I'm almost thinking about it like in a different, like the way you framed it makes me think of it in a completely different way. But uh just the idea that this box exists and what's inside of it is shocking. And so to be honest, I thought of a Jack in the Box when I was coming up with this. Like it's like you wind it and wind it and wind it until something happens. And like we're even like we see that with like riots and stuff. And like so like really with the events of this past week, we were anticipating that. So like for me, framing the Black experience in this way, it's just like it's shocking. Like you think it's real chill as you're going along with it, but then all of a sudden like something pops out and it shocks you, and it's like it's disturbing, but also there's joy in it. So and I found that joy, I think, in the slave sequence when he's playing with the cotton and singing. It's like an intimate moment. So really just like this box, yes, it's frightening, and it's daunting. There's a lot to it, but like there's also beauty and joy within that pain. And I think that's something that we kind of have to highlight. Otherwise, like for me, like then it becomes a question of how do we continue to move forward if we don't find the joy. Like one of the things, like as an actor, that my professors and everyone would always say to me is like, find the joy, like find the joy in this piece. And I'm just like, well, what are you talking about? Like I'm here, I'm doing work, like I'm happy. So it's like that joy, like where does it really exist? Like so like even in those ugly moments, like we have to like see that somewhere.
And I think too, this whole idea of joy is such an important part of the African American experience. Because even my grandmother used to tell me all the time. She's like, when I say, "Oh, grandma, I'm so happy," and she's like, "You don't want to be happy because happy is fleeting. But you want to find joy. You want to find something that's deep inside of you that sustains you." Right. And I really think like the joy that the African American experience, like it's such an important part of why we survive. I truly believe that. Because like if when you think about all that we have been through, had there not been some form of joy, we would not be here. I think we would have been an extinct race, honestly.
Yeah, and I honestly think that's like that has become really apparent to me during this pandemic of like being stripped away and kind of crashing down, gigs disappearing left and right. And then it's like I can either like I can wade in this like muck and like this disgusting feeling, or I can find the joy out of it. And for that, like it was like being home with family, like that's the joy. And like that's also a big part of the African American experience, is just like finding joy through family and those around you, because like at a lot of times that's all you had, like literally. That's
exactly. Yeah. So Scott, do we have any questions, comments from any of our wonderful guests?
So far, Richard has a question. I've got a question. Carla, I think, just put something in the chat too. Let's let Richard go first. You're muted.
Sure am. Thank you. Sorry I was late. Thanks so much for this. And I have to say, I have absolutely no firsthand experience about being Black, but I've been reading Albert Murray's classic book. The 50th anniversary edition came out last February. Just to mention the name, The Omni-Americans, Some Alternatives to the Folklore of White Supremacy. And that was one of the most striking features of his book as I read it. He said that this common mainstream narrative of Black oppression back 50 years ago overlooked the joy that was part of Black experience. And from his perspective, it's we white people who are really missing out.
Yeah. Honestly, first of all, the white supremacist ideology that, positions, subjugates Black people, there's a reason why I think white people are so tied to that particular narrative and don't embrace the fact that there is joy coming out of it. And the reason why, right, is because, in my opinion anyway, the reason why is because if white people allow the subjugated people to also claim joy or to claim success or to claim anything positive, then suddenly it's more difficult to subjugate them. Because suddenly they're a well-rounded person, like suddenly you're human.
Oh, yeah.
There's humanity there. And so we have to sort of, it's important, I think, in the white supremacist ideology to not embrace that, to completely ignore that.
Could we also say that, shifting the focus to religion that many white people have missed the core message of Jesus.
Mm,
Black people who are actually true Christians.
right. Mm. You're about to get me into a whole other, you get down this doggone white Christianity road.
So
It's,
but the more I learn about this, the more it blows my mind.
yeah. Right. I mean, well, yes, right. And I mean, the whole, like, whatever's happening in our world right now, this sort of racial reckoning, this kind of sudden awareness, I think is good, but we have to be, we also have to caution ourselves, I think, because there is nothing new under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like we pretend, or we like to pretend that this is all something this has been going on for 400 years on this land, the subjugation of Black and brown people, of indigenous people, the using Christianity to justify the rape and pillaging of whole communities. That's nothing new, right? And I'm curious, what I'm curious about from an African American woman growing up in the South, what I'm curious about is why now? I'm curious as to why white people all of a sudden, why now? Why are you so now? I am gonna go and research that. I am gonna read this book. I am gonna, like, why now?
Yeah. Well, I'm from Chattanooga, although I now live in the Washington, D.C. area, and I don't want to take all the time, but I've got to respond to what you said.
Mm-hmm.
I was an activist in the 1960s, and I'm reading this wonderful book by a Harvard history professor, Robert Putnam, The Upswing. So he gives a historical perspective over the last 120 years, where he kind of names the 50s and 60s as America at its best over that time frame, not only in terms of civil rights, many other issues, unions, less income inequality, and he lists many factors about why things have gotten worse. I simply didn't realize how bad things were. I heard Paul Butler speak a year ago. He's a former federal prosecutor. He's Black, and he wrote a book titled Chokehold. So this was well before George Floyd's murder. And it was just shocking. I told him after his speech that I had no idea how bad things are. So, I consider myself in favor of social justice in all forms. And I guess I'd gotten complacent. I just didn't realize how deep-seated racism is. And I got one theory about it. I'm a psychoanalyst and psychiatrist. So my one theory about it is that whites suffer from unconscious, profound feelings of inferiority compared to Blacks. I mean, who had the physical capacity to do all the hard work? It wasn't white people. Who were the star athletes? Usually Blacks.
I know I can speak from my own personal experience, because that's a really big question you asked, Angela. And there was never a differentiation, I think, between equality and equity. And I think that as we looked, especially the racial reckoning of this summer, watching George Floyd for 9 minutes, it opened up this idea of equity in systems. And so it became more than an individual response to, oh, I see no difference between, races or whatever. It became something about systemic inequality, systemic inequity that was a real inconvenient truth. And a lot of people's eyes were opened wide. What we're seeing now, though, is the same response with white people, is a narrowing of that again. Oh, is it okay to just kind of like step away from the uncomfortable conversations and not look at this as something I need to be actively exploring every day? That this is a healthy, positive habit. That every day I'm going to interrogate this. I'm going to have a thought in my mind and go like, dude, that was racist, man. Where did that come from? and look for the stem of that, because I think Richard's right. It is all about insecurity at the end of the day, and it's all about what am I losing, when what are you taking, and so that's probably one of the major reasons that we're seeing such an influx of nationalism. It's supremacy and racism disguised as nationalism. Anyway, I'm going to shut up right now. Because that's a big issue for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things I think too that's that Marlon, his project, is that I've been like harping on forever, is that I think there is a refusal, for whatever reason, to accept the Black experience as an epistemology. That it is knowledge.
Yeah.
So if I tell you about my brother who was held at gunpoint by cops because he looked like a guy that robbed a theater, just because he was in the proximity. If I tell you that, that's a knowledge, take it. Understand that is valuable knowledge. Don't come at me and say, oh, well, but I know so many good police officers. I'm trying to tell you from an African-American experience, the knowledge that I have on that is different. Accept it. I accept that you understand that police are here to safeguard our communities and blah, blah, blah. And I'm telling you right now, that's not their job in my community. And that's a knowledge. Yeah. That's something you have to really say, yes, I accept that. And it goes beyond just, police brutality or whatever, but just accepting the Black experience as an important epistemology to America, to the country. Like we're not over there on the outside, like we're a part of this country. And so what we offer, our experiences are critical to understanding, and at least that's what I've been harping on. It's like, it's knowledge, it's knowledge, it's knowledge.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, that's why I wrote this piece. And it's like, there was part of me that wanted to hide that Blackness or hide from those realities that like, this is the world a Black person lives in. Like I was talking to Scott and Angela the other day, and I was telling them about an experience that I had kind of blocked out. Like, but me and my brothers and my friends, we were around we were in 4th grade. So what is that? 11, 12, I don't know. We were young, but we were in the park playing and we had these toy bubble guns, water guns. And someone saw us playing and someone called the cops on us, and they showed up. And then all of a sudden you have 6, 7, 10, 11, 12-year-olds on your knees with your hands behind your head, not knowing what's going on. And so that was, in that moment, I wasn't like, this is racism, I'm being profiled. But I didn't realize what had happened until I grew up. And so and part of that realization came from me accepting that no matter how much education I have, how well I speak, no matter how well I dress, that there is a part of me that will always be seen as a threat or ugly. And so I had to accept that for me to kind of see what is happening to me and so many other people. So the acceptance has to happen on both sides. And I think that is part of why there is such a huge uprising, because I don't think I am the only one who has felt that way. I can't be. So yeah, that's my piece on it.
I'm going to drop a link in here because Angela was talking about, reminded me of an article called How Your Positionality Influences Your Epistemology, right? Where you're at socially and your worldview, how they're just tied together. And it's not a linear journey at all. And I think it explains a lot of this cognitive dissonance that we're experiencing in society, where my worldview is being confronted, and so I'm looking for the inklings of ideas to just draw them together and tie them in a nasty little knot to just keep me fixed in a certain worldview. But there's that link right there.
Awesome.
Julie, you had some really great things to say about who Angela is. Did you just want to come to the space and talk about what you wrote?
You talking to me?
Oh, it's Julie. It was Julie.
Dr. J. Is she still here?
Hey.
Oh, there she is.
Thanks. Yeah, Angela, I was just sharing through the chat, you know, one of the things that I love working with you about is, you know, how you would always talk about the experiencing, the arts give us the space to experience things through all of our senses, and, you know, how transformative that is. And we really experienced that with the Georgia Incarceration Performance Project. So I don't know if you want to speak to that. I don't want to take up too much space. I'm just really happy to be here and listen and be a fly on the wall. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So here's the thing, right? You walk into this room, and there are piles and piles and piles of letters and images and photos and so on and so forth. And just as an example of what Dr. J was talking about, so there was a huge like a book cart, I suppose, and it had these ledgers, just stacks of ledgers on it. And we opened them and we looked at them, and they were called the whipping report. They were detailed incidents of African Americans being whipped while incarcerated for various, most of the time, quite benign offenses, right? There was one that said, oh, he wasn't driving right, 10 lashes. I mean, detailed, right? And so as Dr. Julie, who is all about this sort of using your body, we had to take that and say, now, how am I going to present that on a stage? Like, how am I going to relate what that trauma must have been, right? How are we going to convince these students, show them how to use their bodies to express what happened in 1880, whatever, right? It was, so, you know, and so we had that discussion, like it was a lot of discussion about how much violence can we show, like how much of this, it's a violent thing for sure, right? But how much of that can we show? How much of that can we not show? And so then from a writer's point of view, as you know, writing the piece, it became like, how do I? Because part of me wanted to say, you need to see this, right? It has such a connection to the history of slavery. Like, they're like, okay, this is how we punish slaves. We whipped them, we tied them to a post and we whipped them. So this is also how we're going to now punish the incarcerated. We're gonna do the same thing. Like, we're not gonna do this exact same thing. And so then it becomes like how do we confront it? How do we confront what is a really difficult history? And even more problematic for me was just making the connections between, okay, yeah, so this happened back in the 1880s, all the way through the early 1900s. And I was like, you know what? There are so many pieces that are still happening. If you think about, you know, it used to be that they, in the archives, they would put people in the incarcerated in a hole, literally outside in the sun, for punishment. That evolved to today, what we call solitary confinement. It's the same, do you know what I mean? Like there is nothing, it's just evolved. It's not different, it's just evolved. And so, yeah, it was a challenge to figure out how to express that on a stage, how to show you the tragedy and the brutality and the horror without also alienating you from the work. And I credit, like I said, Dr. Julie, Dr. Emily Sahakian, Dr. Ama, who were able to figure all that stuff out. I just wrote it. I was like, here it is. Go do your thing. So yeah, but thank you, Dr. J.
Nice. We've got, so I see Richard's got his hand up. I'm going to go to Celeste and I'll come to you, Richard. And I'm going to read Celeste's question because her internet is spotty. So she says, thank you so much for your work, Marlon. It's so beautiful and vulnerable, and using the Dunbar poem at the end really brought a lovely payoff with the mask work. I was wondering, it struck me that the second mask was put on rather than the less controlled first and third mask, which almost suction themselves onto your face. I was wondering why. Each of them certainly had a different quality to the putting on, but to me, that one seemed the most distinct in that moment of the entrance to the mask.
Yeah, so thanks for your comment, first of all. So the simple answer to that is it became more of a choice in that moment, making the connection that you're not going to be unattached from this box until you put this mask on. But also, I think there's a personal side to it for me, because first of all, that was the first mask I made. I have spent the most time with that mask. And like, I know, like, it sounds real nerdy right now. It's like I spent the time with the mask, but like it is like, that is a thing. Like, it is very personal. And like, you usually, like, if I look at the mask, I see my fingerprints in it. So like, that's how personal it is. And so like, that mask is just like, has been with me from the beginning, and it's the one that I'm most comfortable. So artistic choice is because it was more of a choice, but personal, like, I think it really showed that like I have a special relationship to that mask, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice. Hey, Richard, come on in.
Thanks, Scott. I talk too much and I apologize for that. But I really appreciate this space. And I want to go back to some things Marlon and Angela said before. Marlon's experience with the water pistols. I used a water pistol as a boy. That never happened to me. Of course, I didn't have to worry about that. The way, Angela, the way you worded it, how to help the audience understand without alienating, I think that is a really complex question. So I would like to propose as an analogy, how do people often react when they hear that a friend or acquaintance has suddenly passed away? Well, what I've noticed is, in other people and in myself, I have to confess, oh, did they die of a heart attack? Oh, they were a smoker. Or, oh, they didn't exercise. If they died of cancer, oh, that runs in their family, I guess. In other words, I think our empathy reaches like a cliff, and we don't want to go over the side of that cliff because it'll be too terrifying to think that could have happened to me. So I'm just wondering if that's part of the white sort of self-protection. Like, I don't want to know too much about what that feels like to be Black. It's a nightmare. It's an unimaginable nightmare. And my people are behind it. My people have caused this, are causing this for Black people. So if people have a conscience, it's unbearable. I'm not saying it's easy to be Black. I'm just saying this might be why white people shy away from it.
Yeah, I think, you know, to accept the knowledge that I have to bring, to say that this is also a part of the American experience, means you have to recalibrate everything you thought you knew, everything you believed about your country, everything you believed about yourself, everything you believed about your ancestors, so on and so forth, right? So yeah, there's an absolute wall that says I can only take so much. because then I got to recalibrate. I have to totally recalibrate what I think. I have to, I mean, and who, and it's, I mean, that's a difficult project. Who wants to do that?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to say, oh my God, now what?
And that goes back to,
I think about, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that goes back to what I was saying before. It's like, for some reason, white people think that something's being taken from them, and it's just mythology. Christopher Columbus was an amazing man. Really, come on now. These mythologies. Nicole Brewer, who's got a wonderful program in anti-racist theater, looks at these as like, what are these fatalist fantasies that you're holding on to that keep you from fully embracing the work of being an anti-racist? And that's what it all comes down to, because it somehow gets in people's minds about equity and about resource sharing or something. It becomes communist, and I don't quite get it either. It's just empathy, as Richard said. This is just about looking at things the way that they are.
Yeah. Any other?
Yeah.
What's happening in the chat and what's happening?
Jojo, you want to come in, ask your question?
Hello. Hi. Sorry that I was running late, so I apologize if any of this has been covered already. But I would love to hear you speak a little more about your use of movement in the piece, because I'm a tap dancer. I'm a white person, so I really make an effort to, we talk a lot about like kind of ancestral knowledge and respecting like the master disciple relationship. So that's kind of my perspective coming at it, and I'm interested in stories that our bodies hold and how we express those with our bodies. So I would love to hear you speak about that a little more.
Yeah. So thanks for your question. So the short answer is I was in a movement class and we were forced to make a movement piece. So that's
cool.
But long answer is I'm really drawn to movement work. Like I have a big dance background. In my undergrad, I was a dance minor. Really, it was a major, but I'm not gonna, whatever. I'm not salty. I took enough classes where like, I've done enough. So it was theater and dance. And so dance is like already part of my artistic, my vocabulary. It's part of my instruments. And so our movement professor is all about like, using what's already a part of you and like all of this like Zen type stuff. And so like in movement as dance, it is a really big part of the Black experience, especially tap and soft shoe. Like that is Black all the way. And Angela can probably tell you a lot more than I can, but it is like the body is how we communicated it. We couldn't really speak. We had to come up with secret languages and body movements, and like so it was like this really intricate thing. So besides being forced into or giving the opportunity to create a movement piece, I was really excited to explore and learn a lot more about where this affinity for movement comes from for Black people.
Cool. Thank you.
Can you talk about the journey? Oh, go ahead.
Can chirp in on that as well from Georgia Incarceration Project. Yeah. Is this idea of movement and body and embodying memory, and then how to express that and everything, because that's her jam.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put her on the spot.
Yeah. Well, and like it's also.
Did you just heave a long sigh there, Dr. J? She's like, oh God.
But like even just like the black body was just like it was used for commercial purposes and just like exploited. And so like to move throughout this whole piece trying to tell a story, that was powerful to me, thinking about like how the black body has been used and perversed, and goes from this disgusting things to this thing that's almost like coveted right now. It's kind of gross, but so just like watching the different stages of like the black body and like how it's been used. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating too, because what happened, in the the history of slavery, the one day that slaves were allowed was Sundays typically, and on those Sundays there was sort of this dancing and this creation of their own music and on these Sundays, right? And so absolutely, using like the body as an expression of not just joy, right? Because the other thing that was happening on these Sundays outside of the watching eyes of the master was mockery of whiteness. This putting on of white face and walking around like you're the master, and like and like understanding that this is how this is the only way, because we didn't have voice. This is the only way I can kind of contemplate what's happening around me. This is it. And what's interesting about that, of course, is that carried over into early incarceral history. That on Sundays, the incarcerated were given a break. And what do? They sat around, they played the guitar, they sang, they danced, like this whole idea of this is how I can express myself is solely through my body. And so it's always, that's a fascinating thing to me is people who had access to voice versus people who had only access to body, and how our experiences coming up like that shaped who we are. There's no, I get so mad when people say, oh, Black people are so loud and they're so blah, 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 blah. I was like, you do understand that for 400 years, we weren't allowed to speak. You do understand that when I'm gesticulating and using my hands, that's because that's my grandmother was not allowed. She picked cotton. Like, so her body was how she expressed herself. And so I get so angry when, there's this whole thing about Black people are so loud and they so over the top and blah, blah, blah. Well, look at the history. There's always a history. There's always a history that will give you insight into why that thing is.
Carla, I kind of skipped over your observations, and I just wanted to give you a little space to come in and ask any questions or make any observations you might have had about Marlon's piece.
This is fascinating, y'all. Thank you so much for hold it coming and doing this today. I really enjoyed the piece. I didn't read up about it before I turned it on, so it was a shock to the system. At first, I was like, like, okay, here we go. Thank you for that. Yeah, I just really enjoyed the piece. But so many things, so many threads of conversation have come. So many things. What I wrote in the chat was I liked how you kept threading that escape through the whole thing, and even turning your back and taking that swig of alcohol, or that's just really beautiful. The like, we're still here, we're still here, we're still here. So that came across really loud and clear. And then another thing that y'all were talking about that I didn't write in the chat, but like back to the white Christians and the story of Jesus, and how like almost annually growing up, we would replay the Passion of the Christ and just rent our clothing for the horrible things he endured. And it was like, I don't know. And so now I'm looking at that. Y'all, I'm speaking without thinking first, so please forgive me. But just looking at that dynamic of like this thing to, and turning a blind eye to what's actually happening today. Like, that also just popped out to me just now as we were talking earlier. Anyway, I'm not going to say anything else. Thank you for stimulating conversation, and that's it.
Well, thank you for being here, and like don't feel bad, like, because like that's the reason like I make this, like I'm drawn to this type of work, is to just get people to start thinking. And it doesn't have to be like a complete strain and like a string, like as long as like there's a thought and there's an opportunity for conversation, like that's all that matters to me. So like, thank you for watching and being a part, and not being so not running away once you got shocked by it. So thank you so much.
Kate.
Hello, and thank you also for this piece, because it is truly striking, and like Carla, I didn't know what to expect. I was expecting it to be about solitary confinement from the title, and so this was a surprise, but a welcome one. I'm curious if you can speak a little bit more about, because so many elements, the soundtrack was really extraordinary, but it struck me that you are silent the whole piece, and sometimes there's voices, but it makes the music that you've chosen and some of the sound effects really striking. And then it's so incredibly powerful to hear you speak at the end of the piece. So I'm just curious if you can speak a little bit more as to when you chose to incorporate other people's voices versus keeping your own voice silenced.
Right. Yeah. So a big part of the original stage version was this neutral person, the person going through all of this. He's having trouble finding the voice throughout. And that was my experience of like not being able to find the words to express how I have felt as a Black man sometimes. So it's that in struggle, that's internal struggle for Black people to of kind of like bottling stuff up. And another thing I really like to say when I'm talking about this piece or the Black experience is I can show you better than I can tell you. So it's like sometimes we all just need to shut up and just like watch what's going on around us. Like if we just stop yelling at each other and like for me, like this may be the introvert in me, but like I don't like words. Like let's just like show me. So like that was a big part of it. It's like I want to show the Black experience in the most visceral way, and I couldn't do that with words because like again, this was a learning experience for me. So like me going through these scenes, this is all me learning as I'm like showing. So I don't really have the words for it. Like even as we speak, I don't have the words for this for the 400 years. There was something else. I lost it. Did that answer your question? Is there something you want me to expand on?
Yeah, no, I think you answered it. Unless you want to expand upon the words you chose at the end, of course, were so powerful. But if you want to expand on that.
and I didn't even have that ending in the original. In the original, it's a personal story from me about my experience with race. And for the film, since it's going around like that worked in a live performance, like with people in the room with me. But for this film part, like I couldn't feel connected to it. So we taped it a couple different ways, and we just chose what felt best. And so Dunbar's poem really kind of like sums up what I was trying to say with this piece. And I'll be honest, like I was unaware of that poem until like after like a year and a half after I presented this piece, and someone in the audience was like, "You should read this poem." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I should have read this." So ever since then, that poem is just like stuck with me. Like it's just been like it's always in my head.
Thank you, Kate. It was a great question. So we're just coming up. We've just got a couple minutes left in this session right now, and there's two questions here. And I think the first one I will turn it over to Yoda. Yoda Kurt Toffland, are you there? Kurt, you wanna bring your question into the space?
Yeah, my question is, how do we bring to the table of conversation those who most need to hear the conversation? I know how to do that in the prisons because there's containment. And I've had a variety of white supremacists convert because of exposure in the circle, and sitting and listening and questioning themselves. So they find their way to the circle. But I don't know how to do that outside of that containment. I know how to do it in the schools. If we start in third grade, I know how to do it there, right? But in where we are now with the outlet, how do we bring them? The only way to change your mind is to change your heart. And the only way to change your heart is to be in relationship with those who are least like you.
See, and that is a tough question. Like that's something we're all trying to answer. And like I always say, people have to use their privilege to start that conversation with people that aren't going to listen to me. So hearing what you're already doing in the schools and in the prisons, you're doing your part. Like, so don't feel like you're obligated to go out and do it in every aspect. You're working in your little corner of the world. And like the way I think is, if you're changing those hearts in there, then once they go back out into the world, once they leave school, once they leave prison, my hope is that they'll continue to spread that message and do for others what you have done for them. And so some may say that I'm naive in that way, or I'm just like, I always try and find a silver lining, but it goes back to like what I said before, is like we have to find hope, and for me that is hope. So like don't feel like you're not doing anything, because that's a lot for someone to say I've turned some white supremacist. Then like that's a huge thing. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I guess I just want it to be bigger.
Yeah.
You know,
We all
I know what it is. I know what it is that I can do. And as you say, I'm doing that. But in the bigger picture, how do we get people who have a passion for that to work and do the same thing in their little corner? Again, I always think that it has to do with story, because what I've learned over the years of working in prison for 26 years is that once you hear the authentic story of the human being sitting in front of you, you cannot help but love them. It's impossible not to love them. So it's why I'm a story maker. It's why I think story is so important, because, and in story, you have to find your authentic voice. And it's that journey into self that helps you discover that authentic voice. I always ask the BIPOC, I work with about 80% BIPOC in the circle and probably 10% LGBTQ in the circle. And I ask them, well, what is your history? And so many of them can't tell me what their history is. They can't tell me the history of their ancestors, where they came from. Mm-hmm. And so I get them talking about their family. Just explore that. Ask questions of your grandmother, ask questions of your aunties to find out what your story is, and create an interest in going back in history to explore. Because once you tell your story, that's where the power is. That's what brings me to tears, empathy and compassion. But I'm looking for a way to where we are right now with what we've witnessed just in the past couple of weeks, and what we're afraid to witness in a very short period of time. How do we find ways to reach those that are down such a deep rabbit hole?
Kurt, if I can respond to that, from my perspective, the keys are in our hands. The best way to stop racism is for white people to say, stop. Mm-hmm. And it takes the power away from that darkness. And if each of us individually, and I'm thinking about STA last week, the Shakespeare Theater Association is having their conference. And I'm getting ready to lead this mindfulness session, meditation and Kundalini yoga, and the Capitol is breached just as we're going into that session. And I felt like, oh my God, I should cancel this. We should be watching the news or whatever. And then I thought to myself, what I'm doing is creating a pocket of light around that darkness. Maybe there's 1,000 people around the world who are doing the same thing as I am at this very moment to counter that darkness. But I think you're so, Marlon's right. You're doing exactly the right thing now. How do we do this on a societal level? That's the biggest question. But what we can do right now is act as individuals.
I was going to say, as a writer, I completely agree with Kurt that it begins with the stories. It begins with sharing each other's stories. It begins with, but there's also, I remember I was teaching multicultural literature years ago. And so it was at Georgia College State University. And for those of you who don't know, it's a small liberal arts college, but it is largely white students. And so I'm in this class and I'm going over the syllabus, and I get a hand in the back of the room, and this white guy raises his hand and he says, "Why do I need to read that?" And I was just, and really the story was specifically, we were talking about Everyday Use by Alice Walker, and you read her short story. Why do I need to read that? And, it was one of those moments when it was, I was near the beginning of my teaching career. So I wasn't quite sure how to respond. Like, why should you read this? Why should you be exposed to a life, to stories that are not like yours? Why? And it actually took me a while. Like, it wasn't until the end of the semester that I said, you know what? If we truly want, and maybe that's it, Kurt, maybe it's the want to. If we truly want a society that is equal and equitable, then we must appreciate each other's stories, period. There's no, I mean, it's almost like there's no, there's no shortcut to that. There really isn't. And I will say, to that student's credit, he did come back around and he was like, yeah, like I never would have thought X, Y, Z after having taken that class. But I think it starts with the want to. It starts with the do I really want to hear, and as I said before, accept other people's stories as truth? Do I want to do that? And if I don't, why don't I? Why am I so resistant to that? But yeah, that's the billion-dollar question, is how do we move this beyond our little pockets into, the larger arena? I don't know. I feel the same, Kurt. I feel like I'm doing things, but I'm not doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have one more question and we'll have to close out here. But Marlon, as Cameron said in our meeting like 2 weeks ago, the ultimate expression, the building block, the foundation of love is policy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where things are going to get really sticky on a national standpoint right now. And that's where that resistance is. You're awesome. Thank you for being here. So Melinda, and I'll read Melinda's question because she's got some internet issues too. So let's end this with joy. Yeah. Melinda says, I'd love to hear about what or who is inspiring and giving hope to Marlon these days.
You're gonna make me cry. Because honestly, right now it's my son, August. Like, see, here it comes. I was saying earlier that like quarantine has been easy because of my being around my family, but like our son already lived through 2 impeachments. Can you believe it? But he's only he's about to be 2. And there were some dark times during this where like I was down because we were losing jobs left and right. My wife had lost her job. The theater world is crashing. Like I moved here to specifically be an actor, and like there were no acting jobs. And so, but like without a doubt, every day he is smiling and there's joy and there's happiness, and like no matter like what is going on around. And like there are times where like I am crumbling on the inside, but like he'll show up and just like touch my hand and like everything like just like melts away. So really like he's the one that's like really giving me that joy right now. It's not some performer or some politician. It's that little less than 3 foot dude, 30 pounds, just this tiny person. So, and this is him on my phone. Cutest kid in the world.
It is the cutest thing.
He is a very cute kid.
I could talk all day about him. We'll have to do another Zoom meeting, but yeah, that's my joy right now.
Wow, what a beautiful place. Go ahead, Kurt.
I was just going to say that this is a session that reveals the reason that we founded the Shakespeare in Prison Network. It's the same in the founding of the STAW, Shakespeare Theater Association. It's where we can come together to share ideas and be with each other and gain strength to go back out into the world to fight the battles that need to be fought. Because it's very lonely in the work that we do. We're isolated. So this is the joy that I feel when I come to an annual conference. This is our 4th. Staw, I don't know what Staw, 35th or something like that. You know, it's those of you that I know, those of you that I don't know, to realize I'm not alone, to realize that I have colleagues out there who are doing the work and changing their, as Angela says, their small part of the world, because I truly believe that's what would happen. I'm just trying to figure out, how do we diffuse the blatant white supremacy that we're bearing witness to? And, you know, I gotta say, it has so much to do with media. It has so much to do with the stories that media tells. Mm-hmm. And particularly the media that tells the lies that the vulnerable believe to be true. I mean, when you watch look at the faces of those that overtook the Capitol, what do you see? You see total belief that what they are doing is the right thing to do, that they are the patriots that are saving America. I think, go ahead. I was just going to say, story is everything, right? We have to tell better stories, more truthful stories.
I was just going to say, like, I've been ruminating a lot on the idea that the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. And right now, you got a lot, you know, you're looking at this revolt and it just seems so hate-filled. We have to look at the foundation of that hate. It's fear. And so exactly what you were saying, Kurt, before about hearing one another's stories, you know, promoting empathy at every step in life, understanding that truth is subjective, but through that subjectivity, we find collective unison truth. And maybe that's our best step forward. There's so much light in this room. There's so much light in this network, that it just, every week by week, it just fills me to know that, like, despite where we're at as a nation, we're able to come together and take the time to understand that world a little bit better and be a force for good. We're about 15 minutes over. So Angela, Marlon, do you have any final thoughts?
I just want to say thank you all for being here and taking part in the conversation. It makes me feel really good, especially during this time, to know that my work is still, it's sparking conversations, because that's what I set out to do. So thank you for your time and your thoughts. I really, really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I will just piggyback off of that. I really appreciate the invite, and being just allowed to be in this space with all of you, and to, you know, share the work that we're doing. And it has been such a joy to be here. So thank you guys for coming, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Marlon.
Well, thank you. So now when I say what's coming next, I'm excited about next week, because we're going to continue this conversation about anti-racism with Sylvan Baker, who is one of the leaders of the applied theater course at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. And I got to know him during my MFA time over there in London. And he has a beautiful monologue, an hour-long monologue, just ruminating about how we as practitioners can be more responsible in our pedagogical approaches, especially in incarcerated settings. I'm having a little bit of a technical difficulty putting this session up on YouTube right now. It's uploading right now. For some reason, it was like 6 gigabytes as opposed to 1 or something. So I'm navigating that there, but that will be live in, I would say, probably the next 2 hours if you're interested in watching that this weekend. But Sylvan will be with us next Friday from 3 to 4. talking about, you know, the Black academics journey in the UK. So giving us another perspective on that. He's an incredibly brilliant man, just like you are, Angela, just like you are, Marlon. So thank you all for being with us today. Be safe tomorrow, wherever you are. Use love, use love, use love. You know, let's hold each other in our hearts over these next few kind of very tense days. Love you all, and thank you all so much for being here.
See y'all later. Thank you.
Peace out.